I'm Dr. Wycliffe Wright, trained in internal medicine and infectious diseases. Tonight my presentation will be on infectious diseases and the intersection between actions and our choices and the effects on infections. Thank you very much for coming to engage in this presentation tonight.
Amen. Amen. So we got the 8 principles down packed, right? We know them. And now we're incorporating them. Correct? Correct? Now, I told you guys, I think the very first week, this is another quick quiz question. And I spoke to you about doing a partial fast in the day. How many hours must you go in the day between each meal in order for the fast to be effective? 16. 16. Remember everybody was talking about, I can't go 16 hours? 16. In other words, if you eat at 6 o'clock in the morning, your last meal in the day should be at what time? 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Remember, you eat those 8 hours and your fast is 16 hours. Okay? All right. I eat 3 meals a day. How many bowel movements should I have? 3. Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Now, since some of you have been incorporating some of the things we've been talking about, have you seen your elimination improving? There's no such thing. You're getting rid of toxins. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. You're getting rid of toxins. Unless you got diarrhea. If you got diarrhea, then that's a medical condition. But you're getting rid of toxins. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest, I've been going 3 times a day, and I've only eaten twice a day. And it's like, this really, but if your stools are formed and everything, it's okay. It's okay. You're eliminating all that stuff that was been packed in there for so long, and it's getting out. Poison. It's poison. It's poison. And you don't really realize that, but how many of you think about it in the sense of you actually running around with a garbage truck hanging behind you all day, and you know, until you eliminate, that's what you have with you, running around with you. You never thought about it that way, did you? But you got to get rid of those toxins. Also, water is very good for not only eliminating through your kidneys, but also through your bowels, because your stools have to be soft. Okay? All right, this evening, we have so much exciting things to do this evening. And first of all, I want to thank you all for coming out each Tuesday, because I get excited when Tuesday comes. I don't know if you see the excitement in me, but I get excited when Tuesday comes. Because there's interaction. It's give and take. You know, you actually have questions, you know, and it's a way that we actually are trying to do better. You know, it's not me pontificating to you that you should do better. We're pontificating to each other. We're trying to help each other. You know, I told y'all, this wasn't for you only. This is to help me. Amen. And the best way for me to get help is to help somebody else.
Now I see Miss Sarah. Where did she go? Sister Sarah, there she is. So she's one that did come to my class. We had a total of about 15 ladies that came out. Guys, you are more than welcome to come as well. Don't be shy. But I was just really thankful to have the group that we had. Regardless of your fitness level, the next class that we have, I encourage you all to just come on out, have a good time. We had some kiddos there too. We had at least 4 little girls, and they were also dancing. So one thing I did want to encourage you guys about, something that I just mentioned, is having an accountability partner when it comes to working out. And it can even be someone that you guys have at work. It could be your coworker, it could be your family member, but having at least that one person, as I listed earlier, is going to be able to help you guys remain accountable. There are some times when I don't want to work out, as I said earlier, but when you have that one person that's with you, they will help hold you accountable. But then at the same time, you can also bounce back and then hold them accountable. When you know you have someone scheduled to be there with you, I feel like once we're able to really plan and incorporate this healthy lifestyle together, then it's going to be able to help us stay on track.
Well, hey, how y'all doing tonight, man? Great. Great. Well, actually, you know, we got a lot going on. We're still here. We're still doing it. I'm proud of you guys. I'm really proud of you, man. And, you know, y'all sticking with it, and I love you for that. As he said earlier, you know, I'm at Planet Fitness at night, and I had to get somebody to take over for me tonight. I won't be here the full time.
Thank you.
But, you know, I had to be here because, like I said, God has me here and I have to answer his call when he calls. So I have to be here. So see, so I'm expecting this. I'm expecting everything that God is putting in me, I want to instill in you guys. And I want it to come out through health. I want it to come out through action. And that's what it's about. You know, so, you know, I didn't mind leaving my job, coming to where I feel God needed me to be.
Yeah.
So I feel motivated to be here, you see, because you motivate me. You'll motivate me, just like you said, y'all motivate me. And I just want y'all to continue to do that, because if you do, you know, like I said, they're talking about a new me in 60. We trying to do it in 30.
All right.
That's what we trying to do. So, you know, I take the same motivation that I give you guys and I train out there with that. And that's what she was talking about, you know, being accountable for your actions, being accountable for not allowing your partner to you know, he has to depend on you, he or she has to depend on you. That's very important. And that's my job out there, to motivate. Because like I spoke about last time, you know, you have people come in there to, you know, Monday they like, yeah, we ready. But Tuesday like, oh man, T, I don't feel like it. Okay, but then that's where I step in. You know, I let them know, you know, show them the good points about it, you know, where you come from, where you are now. And that motivates people to be able to do that. So don't worry about where you are. You know, be focused on where you're going.
You got to get motivated about this stuff. This stuff is good stuff, folks. This is good stuff. You know, people pay for this kind of stuff and pay a lot of money. And I'm just excited because you folk are motivated to come. There were people who said, well, we need to charge them because the mentality is if you charge people, then they'll come and they'll participate. But obviously you understand the value. So we appreciate that. So we're motivated and we're happy for you to be here. Next, we have Miss Gentry, who's going to talk to us about greens. Greens. How to do green, how to go green. So let's give her a round of applause. Let's bring her on.
Surrender.
How's everybody doing this evening? Great. One of my accountability partners is Beverly Scott, sitting back there. We meet at the gym every morning between 5:45 a.m. and 5:15. So we have an awesome time every morning. And I'm just so glad to see her here. We had the opportunity. Yeah, get the day started.
For people over 70, that's early.
It's early. Well, Beverly said under 70 is early. We had the privilege and the honor of preparing some food for the Soars on Sunday.
Yeah.
And they enjoyed, I prepared the collard greens. So we prepared that again for tonight. So we pray that they taste as well as they did Sunday. My assistant, is going to hand out some information. I hate to read to people because I hate to be read too. So the information is there. I'll just pull out some of the highlights for you.
All right.
Collard greens. One cooked cup of collard greens contains 63 calories. 1 cup raw chopped, 12 calories. So see, you can eat that and not worry about anything. Collard greens is one of my favorite greens to cook because they're easy. You know, you just wash them. You don't have to do like turnip greens and kale, although I love those. Those are good. But my favorite is collard greens. When you cook them, you don't have to cook them to death. You know, you cook them to where they have a good chewy consistency, but you don't want them cooked to death.
Cook them to light.
To light, that's right. They're good. There are many, some of the other vegetables that go along with collards that work the same way as they do. It's like bok choy. I have bought some Swiss chard to show you guys. Everybody know what that looks like, right? Yeah. Oh, okay, well good. I'm glad I forgot it. Bok choy, kale, broccoli. I love Brussels sprouts. Do y'all like Brussels sprouts? Yeah. No. They're good for you. Good fiber. Keep you going, you know. The one thing about collard greens is high in water, high in fiber. So that keeps us going. You know, the other day, Dr. Pelote said we are priceless. And so if we get these good fibrous foods in us, then that helps keep us clean, keep us regular. As I said, I don't like to be read to, so we prepared that information for you so you can read it at your leisure. Another good thing that collard greens can help with is healthy hair and skin. And she has beautiful skin there, beautiful skin. So eat your collards, eat your greens, your cabbage, your kale, your bok choy. You know, so the other thing that I'm supposed to do while I'm up here is to give my testimony on my transition from meat eating to vegetarianism to vegan.
All right.
So it started, our journey started back in 1991. I went to the doctor. I had sinus problems really bad. We would have, my son and I especially would have these dark circles, and the doctor referred to them as shiners. So what he told me to do was keep a food log, to come off the dairy and keep a food log and see if I noticed a difference. Within 30 days, I noticed a difference. So that was the beginning. Now, I didn't grow up Adventist. We came into this faith. I was baptized in 91. My late husband was baptized in 1990. So we started this journey by eliminating the dairy. That was the first thing. Now, if I eat anything now that has dairy in it, I get congested really bad within 24 hours. So I have no dairy. The last flesh food that we gave up was orange roughy. That was a favorite fish. We ate that quite often. But the journey through the years has been great. I took care of my mother who was Alzheimer's. We changed her lifestyle, and we believe that it prolonged her life just a little bit longer with us. But, you know, drinking of the water, a lot of people ask me, what do I do with my skin? I don't do anything. I just drink my gallon plus of water each day. I start out with 2 quarts in the morning before I leave the house, before we get to the gym. And yes, ma'am, I drink 2 quarts and I do a complete gallon each day, plus a little bit. But I have found that since we became Adventists and following a healthier lifestyle, I feel great. I feel great. Wouldn't trade it, wouldn't go back.
All right.
I enjoyed it. God made us. He gave us the manual on how we are to eat and how we're to treat our bodies. And so I admonish you all. I love to see you all come in here with these beautiful smiles. I look at people as God's garden, all these beautiful flowers in here. So drink your water. Be active, like the young man said. You don't have to get out and walk 5 miles like we try to do every day, but just be active. Try and modify your diet. That is the greatest benefit.
My experience in juicing, it's a very expansive and extensive 21-day juicing program. I know some of you are already saying, 21 days, and it's without any solid food whatsoever. Yes, you're getting the nutrients in a very concentrated manner from the juices. And what I have here are seven dark green vegetables, 2 kinds of kale, California kale, bell pepper, cucumber, celery, and green apple for those who need it to be a little bit more palatable. I started this program because I went on an Alaskan cruise with my boss and her sister and a couple of others. And on that 10-day cruise, I tried to eat myself into oblivion. I could not stop. And so I felt that, you know, I had to repent. And the best way to repent was to just start cold turkey, stop eating. But at the same time, I knew I had to get those nutrients. It took me a couple of days, I have to tell you, to work up psychologically to being able to get into a regimen where there was not going to be any, I was not going to be eating any solid food. Day one, you start by, for those of you who want to go on the journey, I usually start the third week in May. I'm a school teacher, and I teach high school seniors, and you know, you want to know, in inner city, you want to know how do I manage to survive, and I've been in that classroom here in Nashville at least 17 years. Well, I just treat them like they are outpatients from a mental institution. And it works. I've been very successful doing it that way. So I have to get them out of my system. It's real. I'm keeping it 1,000, okay? It's real. So when I'm relaxed about this time of year, I teach seniors, you know, they're graduating next week. So I can focus and concentrate on self. The other reason I had to do it is because, you know, if you're in a stressful job, truth be told, you are eating comfort food all the time. You're putting things in your body that you otherwise would never put in there. Potato chips and, you know, I don't eat candy or anything like that, but popcorn, and that's good as long as it doesn't have any salt, you know, or other harmful ingredients in it. But I start the regimen, first of all, with prayer. I ask the Lord for endurance.
Yeah.
I love food.
Yeah.
Do not look very closely. You will see how much my fascination with food has grown over the years. And I was once told that, you know, in our American diet, we tend to gain more weight between November during Thanksgiving and Christmas, the 25th. And by the next year, if we have not taken that weight off for that 30-day period, it becomes permanent weight. And the older you get, the more solid it gets. But I have to tell you, this is the one thing that really helped. In the morning, when I start the regimen, Cheryl is timing me, you know. I love Cheryl and she loves me, so I'm going to turn this way so I don't really make eye contact with her. All right, so at 8:30 in the morning, I have a berry drink. This is 7 dark berries, and they are antioxidants. So they're, you know, cancer preventative juices and so forth. But you do not consume them together. They should be consumed about an hour and a half apart. So the first thing in the morning is 8:30 a.m. The berry drink. It's high density antioxidant, and a cup of herbal tea, and an 8-ounce bottle of distilled water. You see, the idea of using the distilled water is you don't use regular water because if you're detoxing, you don't want to reintroduce toxins back into the body. So this is why it's best to use the distilled water. Around 10:30, an 8-ounce bottle of water with high density green drink, that would be this right here, and hot herbal tea again with lemon and stevia. Some people don't like the taste of stevia. It's okay with me. I don't have to have anything in my tea. Some people like to use agave nectar, but you know, it's an austere program, so I don't want to remind myself of anything that I enjoy, all right? Nothing with sugar in it. So this is the 7 vegetables, and that you consume that about 10:30. Notice every hour and a half, some liquids are going through your body. So you wonder how you're able to go 21 days. Easy, because the liquids are really become your food in a sense. And they are satisfying, they really are. You will have to take a few extra trips to the toilet. And that's okay, because you're juicing, you're detoxing, and you're doing your body a favor And my body, this time every year, it's calling for me to start now. She got the stuff. It's, my body's starting to applaud. I'm getting excited because I return here once a year. I do not recommend this detox but once a year. It is quite intense. So about 12:30, that's when you have your cup of fresh vegetable juice. The other can be a juice drink from like Whole Foods, but mind you, no fruit. And many of those drinks do have fruit, banana. You don't want that. And the author of the book, I first got the idea from my son. He was huge, when he was a student at Pine Forge and Oakwood, I could really put my arms around him. But as he got into his adult years, his girth was like, wow, my hands would not even meet. And then he shared this book with me. And I've seen him every time. That's why I love the girl that he married, because she really got him started on, being conscious of his health and so forth. And so you're going to do that.
What's the book title?
The book title is 21 Pounds, 21 Days by Dr. Ronnie DeLutz. She's an African-American woman who was on her deathbed. She had developed, and she was a nurse practitioner, and she had developed headaches and weakness and just could not walk. And she had gone to 8 or 9 doctors, Dr. Pelote, and I know. She was in California. She should know about Dr. Pelote, But finally, all of the doctors gave up on her, and they put her on Prozac. And she says, I know what that's about. That is the death ceremony drug. And she knew that she was dying. And so a friend of hers started with a colonic. And I'm going to talk a few minutes about enemas and so forth with this program. And slowly she began to get the skin, the hue in her face, and her energy returned. But it all started with going after that colon and cleaning it out. And so after about 2 months, she was healthy and well. And so she has now started her own cleansing detox program in Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. And she, takes famous people, and they just love her to death because she's able to help them to reduce quickly. Yes.
One more time, 21 pounds and 21
Yes,
days.
21 pounds, 21 days. By Dr. Ronnie, R-O-N-I, DeLutz, D-E-L-U-Z.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You can find that at Books A Million or on eBay. What was so interesting, I have to get graphic now, forgive me, I know we're going to be eating in a little while. So would you just indulge me? The first time I did the 21-day detox, after 7 days, you do the enema. Please don't be afraid to do or take an enema. So after 7 days of no solid food, you can imagine, I'm looking at the results. I couldn't believe it. I'm going, what? I hadn't had any solid food for 7 days, and look at this. 7 more days, because you do it every 7 days. Now it's 14 days with no solid foods. The results are the same. So that became, I was frightened because I said, wow, all of these years, imagine what has been going on inside of my colon, and I'm just now starting to address that. Little wonder that we get sick. We take baths, we disinfect our homes, but we have to disinfect our bodies as well. So after 21 days, same thing. And so I think it was John Wayne that they said died. When he died, he had 50 pounds of undigested red meat in his colon. And so that stuff, that gunk, can hang around the walls of our colon forever if it is not addressed. The good thing about this particular juicing program, 2 minutes, right? The good thing about this juicing program, we got to remain friends. You know, I have to deal with Cheryl later. The good thing about this program is you will get results. I wasn't going after losing weight. That was just one of the positive byproducts. I was trying to get my eating under control. And discipline is so important. You know, if you're not disciplined, you're not able to control your temper, your emotions, or anything. But once you get your body in such a regimen that you know that you're in control, everything changes. Your emotions, you know, are uplifted. You tend to smile. And let me tell you, after 3 days, you didn't think you could smile, right? I didn't think I was going to be smiling after 3 days. Actually, the reality is I had more energy than I had ever had. And so by day 4, I was really trucking. By the way, you need to walk a mile a day while you're on this program. You're not going to rely simply on what's taken into your body here. You do a cleansing soup, and all of this is in the handout, because the closer you get towards evening, you know, you have to sleep, and you need something a little more substantive in your system. And in this case, you use the cleansing soup, but you're never eating. You're not chewing anything for 21 days. So at least you're satisfying, you know, some of those taste buds. And then you can have a cup of aloe vera juice, and then you're able to sleep all night. I had no problem sleeping. It was just amazing. And so now I'm going into my 6th year with this program, and I highly recommend it. I'll take a
And the reason why you don't want to do the 2 is because the way your body handles the 2. The body handles the fruit much easier and quicker than it does the greens. So if you take both of them together, your body's fighting trying to digest them. So if you take the fruit berries first, it digests them quickly, and then you can start with the greens 30 to 45 minutes later. Okay? That's the information behind that. So, why are you doing all of this? As I always say, check with your physician before you implement any of these programs, because we're talking about green with the different types of vegetables, and if you're on certain medication, then some of these may interfere with those medications, so please. Now, why are we doing all of this? Some medications may interfere with the juicing.
Of the juicing.
Yes. So you need to check with your doctor before you go on any kind of alternative program, depending on whatever state that you're in. Now, why are you doing all of this? Now, in the United States, we have the Army, the Navy, the Marines. What else? Air Force. What else? Coast Guard. Those 5 services do what? They protect. They protect. And most of the time, they're on a defensive pattern. And from a defensive pattern, as long as you don't do anything that's going to hurt the United States, they're okay. They march around, they look, correct? Your body also has these services in the body that protect. They have an Air Force, they have a Marine, they have Navy, they have the Coast Guard, they have all those different systems. And really, you don't even know it. But she was talking about all the different things that you may encounter. Your body usually takes care of all of those things. So what you're trying to do is get your body in optimum shape. What happens if the body is attacked relentlessly?
White blood.
The white blood cells go into action. But the immune system kind of gets peaked up for that. And once they get peaked up for that, then you have to either command a response, or if those diseases overtake the body, you become sick. Our speaker tonight, Dr. Wycliffe Wright, is not only a board-certified internist, He's also an infectious disease doctor. And we felt it was very important that you know why you're doing some of the things that you're doing, because your body is under assault. So let's put our hands together and welcome Dr. Wycliffe Wright as he talks to us about our immune system and how we're trying to prime it and get it ready for all these diseases.
Thank you so very much for coming to share in this, what I would consider to be a conversation. And today we'll be talking about infections. And I'm going to try to do this a little differently from how I normally make infectious diseases presentations. I'm going to look at this as the intersection of choices, actions, and consequences as this relates to infections. All right. So this depiction here is of some of the things that can cause infections in our body. And down to the lower end of the screen over here, we see what's called prions. Now, prions are just pieces of proteins. And these pieces of proteins were, about 20 years ago, considered to be very concerning because they could cause serious brain infections in humans, and people would eventually die from those infections. That's the smallest kind of infectious particle that we know about. Then we have viruses. Viruses are a little bigger than these pieces of protons, prions, and these viruses usually operate best if they are around other living cells. They don't do well by themselves. But if they get into our cells, then they can cause problems. And examples of viruses would be like the influenza virus that seasonally we get a vaccine for. Then, a little larger than viruses would be the bacteria. And bacteria, they can live on their own, but they are still fairly simple because they don't have some of the complex structures that are necessary to make them very independent. So they don't have nuclei, which is an area of the cell that has the material that directs the cell how to behave. But they're self-contained, and they can cause pretty serious infections. And so you hear on the news about flesh-eating bacteria, MRSA. That would be an example of a bacteria. And then protozoa are a little more complex than bacteria. They actually have a nucleus which directs them how to behave, and they have a defined cell wall. So they're more complex. An example of that would be an amoeba. And people who go to Mexico, especially Mexico City, are always told not to drink the water in Mexico. That's why, because this germ is pretty common in Mexico and causes profuse watery diarrhea, and some people can die from that. And then more complex than that would be fungi. These are multicellular organisms. They are commonly in the soil. We can breathe those in and get infections in the lung. A common fungal infection would be athlete's foot, the itch between the toes, or oral thrush. Babies commonly have that, and females commonly complain of thrush infection vaginally. So that's another germ that can cause infection. And then here are elements or worms. And so this is particularly interesting for me because when I was growing up in Jamaica as a young boy, every summer our parents would deworm us because we would get worms during the summer, and I'll go a little more into that. So that's the spectrum of organisms that we talk about that our bodies have to be defending against on an almost daily basis. Now, how does our body do that? Well, this is a schematic of the body, and the skin is one defense against infections. So if we get a break in the skin, like athlete's foot, you get redness between the toes and a break in the skin. Germs that normally live on the skin that wouldn't harm you can get between that break, get into your bloodstream, and cause bloodstream infections. So the skin is a pretty good defense against some kinds of infections. Then the hair on the skin helps to keep certain germs away and helps to protect others and helps to control your body's temperature. So having hair on your skin is also important as a defense mechanism. There are smaller forms of hair in our nostrils and in the breathing tube down in the trachea and the bronchi, and those collect particles that we breathe in the air, and occasionally we sneeze or cough, it's wafting those germs that would collect in the lung and cause problems out. Then we have wax in the air. The wax prevents germs from getting into the inner ear canal, and that's pretty close to our brain and causing serious infections. We have in our stomach, the acidity of the stomach, the pH, is 1.5 to 3.5, and Dr. Pellew talked about our body's pH being 7.5 or so. So you can see how acidic the stomach is. So when we eat certain things and those germs get in our stomach, that acid destroys those germs. The acid is also important for digestion, but it's a protective mechanism. Tears wash away germs in our eyes, keep our eyelids clean. They have chemicals in them as well, which decrease the effect of germs. Saliva kind of does the same thing for the mouth, and there are other secretions in our body that protects us from these kinds of organisms that we talked about earlier that are threatening to cause us harm. Immunity. And I'm going to try to make that, I know I have doctors and nurses and teachers here, but I'm going to try to make that real simple. So cellular immunity means there's a certain kind of cell in our body that when it recognizes the pathogens, the germs that we talked about, the bacteria or the viruses, tries to grab onto those germs. When it grabs onto those germs, that cell that's grabbed onto those germs then behaves in a slightly different way, so it attracts other cells in the body. When those come together, here, they secrete additional chemicals in our body, and between the combination of the cell that got the germ that's likely to harm us and those combining together, and then these chemicals which they release, they then destroy the cell. That's called cellular immunity. That's a slow process that protects us from harm, but it's usually ongoing. It helps protect against viruses, helps in protection against cancer, and it helps in protection against things like worms. The one that we tend to use more commonly, even though these two are going together simultaneously, is what's called humoral immunity. And in this one, it's like when you get a vaccine, your body is exposed to a piece of protein we call an antigen. The body recognizes that piece of protein. Like a key in a lock, it makes something that will now bind appropriately to that protein, and then by combining with other elements, it destroys that germ. So these two systems are working all the time to protect our body, the humoral and the cellular. In addition to our body working just from the structure of our body with the skin and the wax and so on that we talked about, and the humoral and the cellular immunity, there are things we can do to enhance or help to make our bodies not have to work so hard. One of them is hand washing. Now, some people just don't wash their hands, like they're afraid of water or something. But hand washing has been shown to be the most effective way of preventing germs. So let me give you an example. If you go to the bank, you get some money. That money has some germ on it. You put your money in your pocket, but then you scratch your nose. Some of that germ may get into your nose. Now, depending on what germ it is, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus is one common example of that germ. And then you're going to have surgery down the road. That germ now lives in your nose because that's where it likes to live. And then you're what we call colonized, and if your doctors didn't do a good job screening you before surgery to make sure you didn't have that germ and do protective interventions to reduce the burden of that germ, your surgical site can then become infected as a result of you having had that germ on you. So just simple hand washing is, if I don't leave any other message, the one message I want to share is hand washing. So, we come to church and we shake a lot of people's hands, we get a lot of people hugs and stuff, and then we just walk home with these germs. So, we want to try to make sure we get into the habit of washing our hands. And there are two ways for me as an infectious disease doc that we try to keep our hands clean. One is using soap and water, and this describes how that is done. It's not just going and turning the water on and washing your hands. You got to wet your hands, then you got to get the soap on your hands, then you got to rub those things together, that soap, then you wash with running water for 20 seconds. Then, you see right there, you're rinsing with the water, then you're drying. And then some people, when they're finished drying, they just turn the tap off without protecting that clean hand from the dirty tap. So, this is my message right here. Take time to wash our hands. And then, I was talking to my brother in Jamaica, my youngest brother. He's a physician as well. So I was telling him about this last step. And he says, that's crazy. I said, no, that makes sense. Because if you just cleaned your hands on a dirty tap, why would you want to dirty it again before you left the bathroom? And then, when you're getting through the doors, if you notice some bathrooms that are constructed properly, they have the bin right there by the door so you can open the door with that paper and so on. Right. So I just want us to think through this process so that we can make sure if we aren't doing this, then we do this. So when people come to my house for lunch, my wife loves to have people over for lunch. She's an excellent cook. You wonder what's wrong with me, but nothing is wrong with me. She's just an excellent cook. The first thing I say when they walk through the door is, the bathroom is right here. That's just part of my infectious diseases training. So washing our hands is very, very important. If we don't want to wash our hands, except for 2 instances, we have the ability to use alcohol-based product, a gel. For 2 instances, now there was a cruiser. Somebody said they cruised to Alaska. I know we have other cruises here. And sometimes we hear about people going on cruises and coming down with diarrhea. And if you've been on a lot of these cruises, you notice every time you're going into the kitchen or in the dining room, there are people at the door meeting you with some hand gel. But that hand gel doesn't protect against one of the germs that most commonly causes diarrhea on ships, norovirus. For that, you have to wash with soap and water. And you don't find a lot of soap and water where you're eating in the dining room on the ships. The other germ that soap and water doesn't work for very well is one that's called Clostridium difficile, and it causes a pretty bad kind of diarrhea. And you'll hear that in the news, that Clostridium difficile causes diarrhea, and some people can die from the diarrhea. Some people can lose all their intestines, all their large intestine, because it's caused such a serious infection. The only way to save them is to resect that large bowel. So that's why we have here, avoid antibiotic use unless indicated, because one of the common risk factors for getting Clostridium difficile diarrhea is use of antibiotics. Simple things like ampicillin and clindamycin and augmentin and levaquin and ciprofloxacin. These common antibiotics are highly associated with Rocephin, with getting Clostridium difficile diarrhea. Then when we talk about foods, so we talked about washing our hands, so we prepare our food, and some people after they've prepared their food, they leave the cooked food out for hours before they put it away in the fridge. The recommendation is got to be in the fridge at about 40 degrees or lower, and it's got to be put in the fridge within 2 hours of its being prepared. So some people, they'll take the food, they put the food in the fridge, and they'll take it out, they'll warm it, leave it out for another 3-4 hours. They're just teasing those germs, encouraging them to multiply to make sure we can become infected. And there's one other thing we're going to point out later on in the slide about how long we can keep food in the fridge, so I'll come back to that. Then pets, be careful with our pets, because a lot of pets have germs that we can pass from one to the other. So if someone comes in the hospital and sees me with a methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus infection, causing a bloodstream infection or a skin infection, a cellulitis, abscess or boils, I usually ask, do you have any pets at home? And lots of times they'll say they have a dog, and the dog is in the bed, the dog is everywhere. So I say, when you go home, you got to do a deep cleaning. You got to bathe the dog, you got to clean the room, you got to clean. So just remember that we have to do these things. Then the other thing we have to remember is, when we cook our food, apart from making sure we get it in the refrigerator quickly, we've got to also make sure that if we are keeping that food that we've cooked in the refrigerator, in the regular refrigerator, after about 4 days, that should no longer be used. If it's in the freezer, then after about 3 months, it starts getting freezer burn, and it probably should not be used any longer. Some people have food in their freezer for years and years. And then, it's important that we keep our home environment and our cooking surfaces clean. So here are some other ways. Hand washing, we talked about avoiding antibiotic use. Here are some other ways if you go to the hospital, or if you're getting ready for surgery or have had certain kind of infections. Here are some other things we can do. So this is sterile technique. If they're going to open your insides up, germs are not supposed to be on the inside. So you want to make sure we are not introducing any germs. So you notice these people, they're not sneezing inside of you. They got gloves on their hands. They got all these sterile gowns on. So they're trying to make sure they're not introducing any germs into areas that no germs should be. Sterile technique. This one is important for me because I'm an infectious disease doc, and sometimes we treat people who have germs that we don't have to touch them to get. The germs just come in the air, and if we get too close, we may get that infection. So like tuberculosis or measles or chicken pox that are airborne, when the patient gets into the hospital, we put them in what's called a negative pressure room. So this is the hallway. The air comes from the hallway into their room and then gets vented outside the building. If it was going the other way, positive pressure, they would be sick here with that infection, TB, tuberculosis, and they're sneezing and so on, and that germ is coming in the hallway, and so we're just inhaling that germ and becoming infected. So when you go to the hospital and you see the sign, negative pressure room, wear a mask, it's not because we want to be miserable, it's just because we want to protect folk against certain kinds of infections. Certain kinds of infection require special kind of mask. So for TB, we got to wear this kind of mask if we're the caregivers or the family going to visit. The patient wears a regular surgical mask. This one, Hibiclens, if your doctor tells you have MRSA or staphylococcal infections, they want to decrease the burden of that germ, they may bathe you with this for a couple of days while you're in the intensive care unit, or they'll tell you to use it as a bath at home for several days before you come for surgery. And then these here, you'll again see in hospitals where they're talking about hand washing, wearing gown and gloves, because these protect us from picking up infection from people we're taking care of and taking it to other people. Now, one of the most common ways of protecting us about is what we call vaccines. Vaccines are a way of protecting from infections because we introduce a less active form of the organism that will cause the infection. We call it attenuated or live, it may be live, but we've knocked down its efficacy in causing infections. And so the body sees this, creates those antibodies we talked about, so when we get re-exposed to that germ, we immediately react and produce the antibodies, and so the germ doesn't get a chance to cause us any major harm. So what kind of vaccines do you know about? MMR, that's what? Measles, mumps, and rubella, and we usually give that to young babies, and people going to college want to make sure they've been vaccinated. Any others?
Pneumonia.
Pneumonia. So if you have HIV, if you have diabetes, if you have heart disease, lung disease, then there's a schedule for you to get your pneumonia vaccine. Hepatitis B vaccine. Usually we want to make sure young people going into college get that, because after they leave home, some of them start having sexual interactions that they didn't think about doing at home. But just about everybody in this population is recommended to get a hepatitis B vaccine. And in fact, children, when they are born, that's one of the first vaccines they get in the hospital. Anything else? Influenza, right? So every year I get my seasonal influenza vaccine, because if you get influenza, usually it's not as severe, and if you get pneumonia, which can complicate influenza, then you're less likely to get life-threatening pneumonia. So I strongly recommend that people get the vaccine. And let's just parse this a little bit more clearly for us. So a vaccine means you're not getting the real disease. So that's a different kind of immunity than if you get the real disease. If you get the disease and then your body produces antibodies, that's what we call active or natural infection. If you give the vaccines, it's not the active infection, but it produces the same effect. And then we have situations where a mother transfers antibodies to the baby during pregnancy. That's another kind of protection or immunity that the child is developing. And then the fourth kind of protection is people whose bodies didn't make certain kinds of antibodies here. We want to protect them against certain kinds of infection where they are most likely to become seriously ill. We give them what's called immunoglobulins. A series of immunoglobulin shots may run you about $20,000, but it saves people's lives. So I wanted to break this down into God's desire for us to prosper and be in good health, and some of the things that we can do to help our bodies. So we can look at what we eat, puts us at increased risk for infection, where we work. If you are an athlete, like a basketball player or a NFL player, you're touching people all the time, and their germ can get on you. So where you work can impact whether you get infections or not. Where you walk can increase your risk for infections. Where you travel, and with whom we have intimate relationships. All of those can impact our risk for infections. So let's go back here a second. So here, you've been hearing on the news about that romaine lettuce and E. coli illness and some people dying. Because so people are buying this lettuce, which comes from a field where the germ got onto the lettuce somehow. They may have fertilized the lettuce with manure that had the germ in it, or the germ may have been in the soil, and when rain fell, it got up onto the lettuce. They didn't wash it as well as they should. You buy it at the store pre-prepared, and then you get this germ. And people can get serious diarrhea and die. And it can cause, the kidneys not to function, so it can shut the kidneys down. People can also get this from eating improperly cooked hamburgers, from being in swimming pools. So there are different ways that people can, but we're emphasizing what you eat here. And then traveler's diarrhea. A lot of people, when they travel, when they get to the new place they're going, they develop diarrhea just because of the water that they're drinking. Not necessarily because there's an overwhelming amount of germ, but just because of it's different from the water they're used to. And the germ in that water, E. coli, which is a different form of E. coli, can also cause diarrhea. And that's what E. coli may look like under the microscope. Then we hear about salmonella. Salmonella is another one that commonly causes infection. And this is usually when you go to a food stand somewhere, people has a food stand by the road and they're selling some kind of hot dogs. They're selling hot dogs. So when I was working in the Bahamas, and I used to come down with diarrhea. I used to wonder what's going on. I was not an infectious disease doctor then, and then people told me, well, you went to the Salmonella fountain to buy lunch. So, so you got to be careful, right? And so salmonella is pretty common and can cause serious infections, and we need to be aware of that. Helicobacter pylori, which can affect people of whatever age. And they say this is one of the more common infections across the world. It's probably related to crowded environments, the water supply, living in poor areas, and so on. But what typically happens with this is people drink water or eat some food or kiss someone who has this. They get the germ, then it causes ulceration in the stomach. And back in the day when I was in medical school, they would take people's stomach out because of this, or part of the stomach. Then in 1980s, 1990s, there was a doctor in Australia named Marshall who said, this is probably due to a germ. He swallowed the germ himself, got the infection, took some antibiotic, and got better. So instead of taking people's stomach out now, the treatment for this is just to give antibiotics. But if we don't pick this up, and some people won't have symptoms, if we don't pick this up, and people who have serious symptoms, it can lead to stomach cancer. So that's the importance of this. Then this is beef tapeworm. By eating poorly cooked beef, people can get tapeworm infection, and they can get abdominal pain, they can get bowel obstruction, they can get anemia. Then this is pork tapeworm. And there was an incident of a Jew living in New York who doesn't eat pork, but came down with brain infection, and they were wondering how this Jew, non-pork eating, got this brain infection. And I can just imagine the church folk at his church coming up with their kinds of explanation as to why he got this. He's coming here saying he doesn't eat pork. Look at him. But he didn't eat pork. What happened was, there are two ways you can get this. You can get it from eating undercooked pork, but you can also get it if someone gets this infection and passes the eggs of that germ in the stool, and the eggs get on, say, your food, and you swallow that egg, you can get the brain infection. And that's what happened here. So he had a helper who loved pork, got the infection, was not good with her hand hygiene, got it on his food, and he got this infection and nearly died. So that's pork tapeworm, and this is an example of the cyst that you get in the brain from this germ. And usually I see a lot of this in people who normally live in Mexico and so on, but we can see it in other people as well. They come in with headache, fever, confusion, neck pain, and neck stiffness. This is another example of what you can find in the brain. Now, so that's what you eat. So we're seeing how different things can expose us if we don't wash our hands, if we don't protect our bodies, if we don't protect our food, if we don't care for the food after we prepared it, but just where you work. So tuberculosis, there was one instance where when HIV was pretty prevalent in the late 1980s, early 1990s, people were coming down with tuberculosis, nurses and doctors, and they were wondering how. Well, there were patients who had HIV, who had TB, but their chest x-ray didn't show any evidence of TB. So they didn't isolate them in that negative pressure room. So their germ was just going all over the ward. And people were just breathing in unknowingly this germ and coming down with TB. And TB can kill you. TB can cause all kinds of presentation. Hepatitis B, you can get stuck with needles. If you're giving blood transfusions and it's infected and you get stuck, so things like that. Hepatitis C, again, exposure to blood. HIV, needle sticks, not common that you see that. Then Ebola. There's another outbreak of Ebola in Congo right now. 17 people have died so far. This is most recently from Ebola. And unlike some of these, so TB, you breathe this stuff in, hepatitis B, body fluids, hepatitis C, body fluids, HIV, body fluids. Ebola, feces and vomit are some of the ones that can transmit this. The others, we don't get those with those. Those usually have to blood or the air. Then other kinds of occupations, if you're a farmer, or a gardener, you can get exposed to tetanus because this germ lives in the soil. So you can get cut on your skin, the germ can get in, and you can come down with tetanus. Or if you're a farmer, you can come down with anthrax because you're exposed to this germ which causes an infection on the skin of animals. You rub against their skin, you get this germ on your skin. You can get cutaneous anthrax. You swallow it, you can get gastrointestinal anthrax, or you can breathe that in and you get pulmonary anthrax. And you remember about 10 years ago when they mailed these letters in DC and people were worried up because pulmonary anthrax is the most serious form of the disease. And then this is where you walk. So this is when I told you in Jamaica growing up as a little boy, we would get dewormed every summer before we went back to school, because if you walk barefooted, certain germs live in the soil. So people who have bowel movements, they weren't careful, they did it just around, and you walk, you stepped in that, they release the eggs from the worm in the soil, the eggs hatch, then you walk barefooted and they get through your skin. And then they get into your lung and down into your intestines, and they cause anemia, belly pain, appendicitis because they block, and so on. So just where you walk can expose to that. So hookworm is one example. Here, Strongyloides stercolis. Here people get abdominal pain because of the same thing. This germ got through the skin, got into the intestines, and caused significant pain. This slide is actually in the wrong place. This is cutaneous larva migrans. So people who have pets, and the pets defecate on the beach and so on. You go on your vacation, you're taking bathing in the sea, you lay down on the sand without a towel. This germ can burrow through your skin and cause what's called creeping eruptions. It's usually sample limited, but people get real scared about it. And those are just examples of how we diagnose these in the lab or in other ways. And then this one here is from intimate exposure. So people get HIV through different methods. The most common risk factor for HIV is men having sex with men. But also at risk are a lot of married people, because there are some people who have sex with men and women. Also at risk are our community. Blacks are, men having sex with men are the highest risk, then female blacks, then Hispanics, then whites. So even if you don't have sex with men, you just have regular, what we consider regular sex, but your partner was infected. So that's why people are recommended, people get evaluated at least annually to see what their HIV status is. Because now HIV is not a disease that should kill you. It is being considered something like diabetes that we have treatment for, and you can live essentially a normal life. The risk factors for HIV are exposure to blood and body fluids, people who inject drugs in their system, and Arthur Ashe, the famous black tennis player who died maybe 1985 or something like that, had HIV from blood transfusion. Now, HIV is concerning because it can cause so many other problems. So here, this is an example of Kaposi sarcoma, which is a skin disease, kind of a cancer that you get because you're HIV positive. These, if you scratch them, they bleed. This is human papilloma virus, and we'll come back to that. You can get this because you're HIV positive, but it's more related to this germ, HPV. And then there's the cervicitis, inflammation of the lining of the womb. People with HIV are more commonly likely to get this infection. Then this is athlete's foot we talked about. This is oral thrush. People with HIV, they open their mouth, you see all this white stuff, cheese-like stuff back there. This is herpes simplex virus on the lips, or they can get infection around the brain, meningitis, or they can get diffuse skin infection. And this is infection around the brain we call toxoplasmosis. So HIV, because the body's immune system is degraded increases one risk for all these kinds of infections. Then human papillomavirus, you probably heard about that in the news, is one of the commonest sexually transmitted infections in the United States. Usually this is a sexually transmitted infection, and the unique thing about this germ is one gets exposed, say today, and they may not know they have the germ, but 30 years later they come down with cervical cancer. Wow. Or throat cancer. So that's why, especially for women, we recommend at least every 2 years getting a pap smear, because it can help to detect if this germ is causing a problem at the cervix, which could be fixed early before it gets to that severe stage. And they have vaccines for HPV vaccine, and there are some people who say they don't want to take the vaccine because their child is not sexually active. The problem is, even though that child may be never sexually active until they get married, their partner may have had partners, and they carry that germ along into the marriage. And so it can cause a problem there. And this is countries where you visit. We can get different kinds of infections. If you travel to Haiti, you're increased risk for malaria. If you travel to some places in Africa, you're increased risk for yellow fever. You can travel to the Caribbean, Jamaica, where I live, dengue fever and dengue hemorrhagic fever, and so on. So, and then I think the final thing is the pets we keep. These pets can have germs. So one of my friends was talking to me 2 days ago and said she had a patient who came in and had illness, and she couldn't figure out what's going on. She finally said, "Do you have any pets?" And the patient said, "Yeah, I have a turtle." Well, turtle puts you at increased risk for salmonella infections. So the message from this is, not infrequently I go into a patient's room when I'm seeing them in the hospital or in my office, and I take a seat and I start asking them questions. They say, "Go read the chart. It's in the chart." I said, "Well, but you know, if they made an error," I'm trying to be nice, "if they made an error, I might be going down the wrong road just reading the chart. So please be patient, answer my questions." And you start taking this family history and the social history, and you find out that the infection is related to some pet they have. You know, if you have HIV and you have cats, then you're at increased risk for toxoplasmosis. So when you go to your doctor and they're asking you questions, the message is just try to answer, because there may be some method to the madness. I think that's it, unless you have any questions for me. All right, since no questions?
So, Doc, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So, you talked a lot about vaccines, and there's a lot of discussion out there about side effects of vaccines. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because some people are just a little. I know there's a danger from the disease, but then they're afraid of the vaccine as well.
Right, so let's do a little history. Okay. If we look at lifespan for folk over the years, one of the commonest reasons people were dying was because they had some kind of infection. So if you just take history alone, people would live 30, 40 years and then they would die from some infection. Now the average lifespan for a United States citizen is 70 or so years. Part of that is because we've overcome these diseases by using vaccines. The effect of the diseases. So yes, the way I look at it is just about anything we do has a risk. And there's certainly some risk associated with vaccines. That's usually something they use to preserve the vaccine, to prevent the vaccine from going bad. They call it thimerosal. So I'm not saying people are forced into having vaccines, but I think when you weigh the risk versus benefit, I think the benefit is you're always going to probably do better if you get vaccines.
I want to bring up something about experience I've had. I only took a flu shot one time, And that one time was a bad experience for me because when it was given to me from at work, and I don't know, it was that same day or the next day. I thought I had had a stroke or something. I could move my left side, and I just stayed in the bed and.
Right, so there are some indications where we say if you've had a bad response from the egg in a vaccine or something, or you're allergic to egg, you shouldn't get certain kinds of vaccines, or if, like you did, you probably shouldn't get that vaccine again. So yes, there are times when we say, don't take this vaccine again. But I try to simplify this and I say, you know, I was driving one time with my entire family in the car and I fell asleep driving at 70 miles an hour and I got in an accident on a bridge. I could have almost gone over. It woke me up, but I still drive today. So then we got to, again, weigh the risk versus the benefit of what we do. Talk to your physician, research, and you're going to always find people with different positions. So not everything you see on the internet is correct. You know, people come into my office, I'm the expert they say they're coming to. They bring me this stuff from Google and say, read this, then tell me what you're going to do. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend you get the flu vaccine again, but you're a unique situation.
I saw him over here.
I wanted to ask about keeping the food in the fridge over 4 days. Why is that? You said it's not recommended.
Right, because germs have a way of adapting to your environment, and germs, whatever environment you find, you'll find germs living there. So after a while, the germs, the colony count, the number of germs start multiplying and puts you at increased risk for some kind of infection.
So why the 4 days? Why after?
So usually in medicine, most times what we do is we take food, put it in the fridge for 1 day, check the colony count for the germs, 2 days, do the same, and that's where they found what we would call it was the break point, where it's most likely to have the most germs to cause infections.
Okay, so like if you're at home and you have, you know, you said your refrigerator has to be like in 40 degrees Fahrenheit or so. How do you check to make sure your refrigerator is the right temperature? If it's not too high or if it's not too low?
Right. So you.
Some refrigerators don't have the temperature on them.
Right. But you may be able to get a thermometer that can help you to measure that. So in the hospital, we have thermometers that keep vaccines and other medications, and every day they take a log. They put a thermometer in to see what it's reading. You know, you don't necessarily have to do that at home, but in the hospital, we're duty bound to make sure we're not causing harm to patients, so we do that.
What about food poisoning?
Right, so food poisoning is a generic term that includes things like what we talked about, that romaine lettuce infection, E. coli, or salmonella infection, or norovirus infection. We group those all together as food poisoning because we ate some food that had some germ on it that then caused vomiting, diarrhea, belly pain, fever, and so on.
Any other questions?
Dr. Wright, even with the romaine lettuce, if you wash it, does that wash off the E. coli, or do you wash it thoroughly?
Right, so if it's washed properly, that will help to decrease the number of the organisms. This particular organism has a high infection threshold, meaning a small number of the germs can easily cause infection. But yes, proper washing. But you know, remember, these are pre-prepared where they say just open and use, so that's why people are not washing.
Any other questions? Yes.
I've got a particular question in regards to C. diff. A lot of elderly patients, like in the nursing homes, get those infections. And of course, they treat it with antibiotics, but they tend to get it recurrently. So is it actually something that the antibiotics cure, or does it just incubate until it colonizes some more and multiplies?
Right, so C. diff, why is it recurrent? Antibiotics, and it could be antibiotics that we took 90 days earlier. And I'm here now 90 days later, and I'm coming down with C. diff. That's because that antibiotic that I took altered the proportion of germs that live in my intestines. So in America, there are probably 51 men to every 49 women. In the intestines, there are different proportions of each germ. So you have E. coli, you have fungus, you got Clostridium, and there are different numbers in relation to each other. And those numbers in the normal intestine help to keep each other in check. But when we give the antibiotics, we kill off certain of the germs that allow the others to say, this is a field day I've got all this place to myself, let me just multiply. And so the Clostridium difficile does that. And we have to get the proportions of the germs back to the correct numbers before we can effectively eradicate the infection. So when we have patients who get C. diff, and we usually treat them for 10 to 21 days with antibiotics, and they come in again, we give them a longer course and taper it over time, 3 months or so, 6 months. Then we make sure we don't introduce other antibiotics that put them at increased risk. And we ensure they're washing their hands and do other hygiene stuff that will decrease their either reinfecting themselves or not allowing the bacterial count in the gut to normalize.